Well, hello, everybody. Welcome back to our conversation. My name is Cullum Line. I'm the Youth Ministry Coordinator here at St. Anne's Parish, and with me, as per usual...
I'm Father Matthew. I'm the pastor here at St. Anne's.
Awesome. I was going to say the man in black, but I was like, well, black and gray.
You're the man in black today.
I guess. Yeah, partly. There we go.
Yeah.
We are diving into our series. We're continuing on and still in the good old Easter season.
Mm-hmm.
And
talking about sin and Easter.
There we go. But before we do that, a little kind of fun, loving stuff. So this is Revenge of the Fifth. Technically.
Oh, boy.
I'm a Star Wars nerd, so we got to go in there.
I watch Star Wars. I don't celebrate these days, though.
Yeah, I don't really do anything serious about it. But yesterday was May the 4th. May the 4th be with you.
Oh, boy.
Star Wars nerd needs to get it in there. But my kids were excited.
I'm more opposed to puns than the days, to be clear. That's where my opposition comes from. In case you're wondering.
My kids went outside. They like to draw chalk on the driveway and the sidewalk to wish May the 4th to everybody.
Oh,
there you go. And then I was like, are we better evangelists for Star Wars than for Jesus? That was kind of my parting thought last night. And I was like, oh, no, got to work on that. But we had some fun with that. The perk of the gig is my 16-month-old. I don't know how old Killian is, but he woke up early. And some days, I'm not totally a morning person, but I was like, hey, I'm up anyways, and there's a new Star Wars cartoon. So let's put the coffee on. And I got to hang out and do that with the kids before coming to work. So that was our little fun midweek thing.
Yeah, the new Bad Batch. I think it's the new. I actually watched it late in the evening. So we had First Communions last night. We have 5 masses of First Communions because we're limited to 30 people right now. We had our first one. It was wonderful. We had the mass and spent some time with the families outside afterwards. And then I got home and I went to about 10 o'clock. I turned it on to watch this. Thinking it'd be a nice 20-minute cartoon episode. It was like an hour and 15 minutes.
Takes some commitment.
Longer than I was expecting.
There you go. He powered through. I'd like to say it's fun. It's just I like having shared things with the kids, and so it's kind of like I told you, it's like Ninja Turtles, but like with clone troopers. You know, it's just these quirky little characters, and yeah, it's fun. It's fun to have something to kind of journey in. The other news, I guess, yesterday was government doing a little bit of a plan for reopen. I guess in some of these stages, and nothing has instantly kind of changed, but I guess maybe there's some hope, or at least there's kind of a plan, right?
Yeah, like I personally I appreciate seeing that plan and some benchmarks to even for just our pastoral planning. Like after the news came out, I contacted some of our couples that are getting married this summer because they've been wondering what will the rules be. And of course, nothing's for sure, but it looks like we'll be back up to, it's kind of been our COVID maximum of 30% capacity up to 150 people. But it looks like that'll be coming when they start the reopening, which is great for what we're able to do here, that we can start to do that safety again. Mm-hmm. So I appreciate the planned benchmarks that we can look to and start to plan for a little bit.
I was talking to another couple staff members yesterday, and they said, I've kind of, to some degree, tuned out a lot of the news and articles and everything. It's just a little too much for me. But it's I watch the press conferences more of what does it mean for my family and my bubble, and what does it mean for work? Because we're kind of getting into strategy and planning, and we've gotten pretty good at pivoting, and everything's in pencil, not pen, is kind of the way we maybe approach this. But it's still good to have something on pencil, anyways, to kind of to work around and frame around. So it's praying that everyone continues to. We keep trending in the right direction. So
yeah, absolutely.
We'll see what happens. Shall we dive into this?
Let's do it. Yeah, from Star Wars to reopening to Gluttony was our sin of the week this past week.
There you go. Yeah. It's just one episode. It wasn't an entire season. So
it was it was like 4 episodes worth of episode. Okay. But anyway, speaking of gluttony, here we are. So I kind of gave 2 definitions of gluttony. Maybe we'll start out there. So one is reducing human life to self-gratification. That's the more technical one, where we're just looking for pleasure and not much more than that, in a way, is gluttony. Or then the more evocative maybe description is reaching for a French fry when my heart is longing for God. And I hope as we talk through that it'll make sense why that would be the case. But that's our... But you said that got an audible reaction out of you when I said it?
Yeah, we were at home again this weekend, and I laughed, not so much of it was humorous and off counting, but I was like, that's just very on the nose. You know? It's just sometimes those witty snap things. I was like, yep, that just cuts like a knife, and gets right to the point. And yeah, I thought it was good.
And so basically, I know what it says. I appreciate that. But of course, the point being that our deep desire, like God, the fulfillment of all desire is God himself, of course. But sometimes because God can seem far away, inaccessible, even unreal sometimes, instead of going for that real fulfillment of desire, we reach for a thing that is closer and easier, but not nearly as fulfilling.
Mm-hmm.
That's the reaching for the French fry, because my heart is longing for God.
Yeah, a similar kind of analogy that kind of reminds me of this is Christopher West, who's a kind of a modern kind of speaker and does a lot of teaching on St. John Paul II's theology of the body.
Yeah.
And he sometimes talk about this longing that we have and for relationship is like, eating out of the dumpster when the banquet is just to the right. But that seems too far. You can't see it. And the garbage can is lit up. And
or somehow we don't deserve it.
Yeah, or feeling the shame, right? We're
yeah.
not deserving. We don't deserve to sit there or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's we'll be getting to that sin as well in a little while. That
Christopher
West focuses on in time to come. But maybe this is a good time to talk about too what I've been saying as part of my intro is that these 7 deadly sins are deep drives that are the root cause of our active sins. And this way of talking about gluttony is a good way to understand that, because we're not like gluttony is not just about eating too much food. Like that's one manifestation of it potentially.
Yeah.
But real gluttony is that the deeper drive, which is we have this desire for God fulfilled in God, but sometimes that seems too remote, so we go for the easy grab. And we see how that way of going through life or approaching things really would hamper our spiritual growth and just our lives as people as God made us to be as well.
Yeah. Do you think it's fair to use kind of the expression of saying we're settling in a sense?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
When you kind of use that language kind of in pop culture, like it is a little bit of like, and maybe it's not fair because I think there's periods of my life and other people that maybe don't even know what their ache is for. We'll get to a little bit later. Don't even know maybe what they could have. So maybe it can't be sort of settling
doing
in
the
that
best
sense.
we can as we know it in a sense.
But I would say there's definitely periods in my life when I know 20 minutes of exercise is better for me than just going to Wendy's and eating in the parking lot because I don't want to deal with my kids or whatever. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's definitely
and this is also part of our call of evangelization, of sharing the faith, that because there are people who we know and love who do have this ache that is fulfilled only in God, but if they don't know that God is the fulfillment of that ache, like that's why we have this opportunity and obligation to point to that fulfillment.
Yeah, I like that, right? It's the idea of maybe, that we, in a sense, are sometimes can be spiritually asleep or unaware, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not, it's like turning the light on, right? And to say like, look and see and become aware. And it's not even to be like, now you're like me or this, but I love the experience. It's part of the reason I serve in the way that I do for the churches. There's almost nothing greater to me than when I see that hunger and that thirst for God kind of like be discovered and desired in somebody, right? Mm-hmm. In a teenager, you're just like, that's amazing.
Yeah,
right? Like
absolutely.
Suddenly you were satisfied with Star Wars Battlefront 2 yesterday, and you'll still play it today, but now you actually are hungering for God's word. Like that's an amazing thing to witness.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
So then to get onto more of the focusing on gluttony, so we have this desire for fullness that we sometimes pursue in wrong ways, and that's a legitimate desire wrongly pursued. And then in the homily I gave these 3 points from St. Augustine, actually, of ways that gluttony can hurt us, or ways that this desire wrongly pursued can hurt. And I thought we'd talk a bit through both of those, or all three of those. So the first way we can pursue feeling good in the wrong way is in a way that hurts us physically. Mm-hmm. And this is in the way of the more quick view of gluttony in terms of eating too much, drinking too much. We could talk even about like drugs, gambling. Like there's a lot of ways I think we could think of that. We have desires, we're filling them in ways that are not filling them actually, but are hurting us in all sorts of ways.
Yeah, and I think that's, I don't know if you say it's the surface level of the 3 types of hurts, but it's the most obvious, the most common. Mm-hmm. When people say gluttony, like this is the go-to, right? Like people get the Netflix binge and the button comes on, are you still watching? Sometimes you're getting maybe to this line at that point, or it's the, ignore the family sitting at the table and scrolling on, Instagram stories or searching or whatever, getting lost in terms of that stuff. Mm-hmm. And it's that idea of like, we know that hurt is probably the most obvious, right? Because it's being done to ourselves.
Yeah. And probably the farthest edge of that would be given to addiction. That's often what is driving it. And we see how damaging that is in so many ways.
Yeah, 100%.
So that's a real one. And then the second way we can pursue feeling good in the wrong way is in a way that is hurtful to others. And particularly, I mentioned that this brings in our call as Christians to social justice, for our responsibility for one another and the social teaching of the church. And it is true that, especially thinking of us in the wealthier part of the world, that our desire for comfort and fullness and ease of life, that like this does hurt other people, especially those who are less well off than us, more vulnerable than us, and in like less well off countries than us.
Yeah, and it's I think it's my good friend, I can't remember the name of his title. Do you know Peter Van Kampen? Yeah. I think he wrote a book kind of on this idea of like living simply, in this idea of in a sense of being in solidarity with others, right? And I can't remember that line, right? It's like live simply so others can simply live, right? Yeah. And it can be to be very disconnected, right? To say, even the clothes I wear, how are they produced? How is this, are we, using too many resources that we're, as we're stripping resources from another nation, and like just that sense of solidarity and connectedness. And it can be very easy to be blind and kind of deaf to a lot of those realities, right? Yeah. And it takes time to think about that. Like,
and it can be hard sometimes because it's hard to know what to do about that.
Yeah.
Like, I get that the fact that I want to buy a $5 t-shirt rather than a $20 t-shirt means someone is getting paid a very small amount to make that $5 t-shirt. Mm-hmm. But then, like, I can acknowledge that and not like that, but then what do I do about that is that's, I think, often where we get stuck sometimes.
Yeah. And
we are a little piece of a really sinful structure.
Yeah.
But how do we repair our little piece of it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole maybe other conversation or series, right? That's a big one. But even for the sense of today and this weekend, I was going in there, it was like, am I even thinking about that when it comes to my use or overuse of things?
Yeah.
Right? At least having that acknowledgement to say even struggling is a step in the right direction, right?
Yeah.
But how often do I not even consider that?
Yeah.
So I even appreciated this, coming from Augustine, to kind of say like, this is one of the ways that it hurts. And if I'm honest, that's probably the one that I forget about the most.
Yeah, and this I had never thought of this as part of gluttony until I did this homily, and St. Augustine told me it was.
And you said, okay, St. Augustine.
Okay. And even if we want to open the door of like global warming, the fact of that, like most of the science seems to be saying that it's most of the consumption from the wealthy world is where a lot of the damage is happening. But then where a lot of the hurt is going to happen is more in the global south that is less able to deal with the change that's happening. And there too, isn't that a matter of our comfort and our ease of life that we want? And we're kind of hoping that it won't actually cause much damage. We're hoping that it'll come after our lifetimes. But it is a real thing that we need to examine our own hearts of, especially if we do have a tendency to say, I'm just not going to worry about that. How much of that is just because I like my life now and I'd rather not make a change.
Yeah, it's like you said, there's a lot of struggle and battling and education and awareness, that goes to a lot of this. It's part of the reason, personally for me, that I appreciated doing some solidarity trips or mission experiences and just straight up traveling around the world. Besides, I love traveling. I love engaging different cultures, but I feel that has actually, and you could say the travel of like, oh, you're spending gas and money. Like, apart from that, even if I could walk there.
Yeah.
But this idea of me starting to come to understand how others live, I think has helped frame how I make better decisions, right? But I mean, you could do that without literally going there, right? You could read a book. You could, we have the internet. We have many resources to help understand how the rest of the world is living. But I know that has been fruitful in my own experience, right?
Yeah.
When I've gone to South America and had different encounters, that it helped me start to reevaluate changes, right? Do I still watch some Star Wars and maybe sometimes too much? Yes, right? Yeah. But I do know I appreciate a steak after I went to a place where someone had no access to meat, right? Or I go to a family where they slaughtered literally their only 2 animals for the wedding feast for the village. Yeah. Right, in a time of famine, and you saw what that, sacrifice or what that entailed, right?
Yeah.
And how much is it no big deal for me to invite somebody over for a barbecue? You know, like, so even like that.
And then in that, I think if we are looking for the little things we can do to lessen the harm and to give more help, right? And even if I think like I just have one little piece, well, if 30 million Canadians were actively doing their one little piece, like that would be a powerful thing.
Yeah, for sure. And what was the third level?
Yeah,
of
so
hurt?
then the third one, and this I spent more time on in the homily, is to pursue feeling good in ways that blind us spiritually. And it's kind of going back to what we talked about at the beginning, that we do have this desire for fullness, satisfaction, pleasure, for feeling good. Like I spent a lot of time trying to articulate that, and that's the best I could do is this list of things. I think we know, like we want to feel good. That's the desire that we have.
Yep.
And the ultimate fulfillment of that desire is God. But because God sometimes feels distant or unreal or is hard to get to, we go for the French fry or the more immediate thing. And it can, and the danger with gluttony, and like sometimes that's not a bad thing. Like I enjoy a French fry and different things like that. But if we do it in a way that dulls that ache for God, so we never really face it and are never drawn to God through it, that's really where the deadliness of the sin comes in.
Yeah. And I mean, I just think it's just a super practical, relatable topic and kind of homily, because I mean, just look at COVID, just look at this past year, right? And I was kind of sharing before we recorded, like almost people have gone through the spectrum of this, I feel like. You know, I
what are some ways you've seen that?
So just like the first couple of weeks of gluttony, we're home and what's going on with the world? I don't know. Well, I'm just going to, you know, comfort food a little bit.
Right,
comfort
wine
experiences,
sales are going up,
right? Because sometimes it's like we're anxious, we're concerned, we don't know how to process that. You know, we're disturbed, there's a lack of peace. So sometimes it was like there was no easy answers. There was a lot of questions. We know a lot more than we did, you know, a year ago. And so sometimes it was like, okay, it's Netflix and the streaming and it's whatever, you know, and that came to some degree. But I've also seen the spectrum of it going where people have like, okay, I did that for a couple months and like, you know, that ache is there. It didn't solve. I'm not full. I'm not satisfied. I'm still lacking peace. And so in some ways I've seen the benefit that I think people have started to say, okay, the ache's not going away. Maybe I can embrace it or realize it or struggle with it. And I think it's drawn some people closer to God, right? And to the source, right? And to say, you alone can satisfy, you know, and, you know, like I think of the woman at the well, you know, give me this water, you know, and in my own life was like, okay, as it's been going, you know, I've talked about a lot of times, The Chosen, the show, you know, the Bible in the year, you know, going through the Bible studies with teens and just our own family, you know, appreciating different forms of prayer and going to God has been a source of consolation and comfort. And that has helped more than any sourdough or Netflix series possibly could have.
And there is a place for all of that, but 100%. It's not the first place. It's really, I think, the key to gluttony. Absolutely.
And that, another season, another episode, it only does so much.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Yeah, exactly. At some point, there's that ache remains.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and then I also mentioned some of the wounds that might lead to gluttony, and that's been one of the principles I've been focusing on throughout this series, that these sins often tell us more about our brokenness than our badness. And I gave a list of wounds. I thought we could maybe talk about some, or if you think there are more, because gluttony, I think there are a lot of things that drive us to seek easy satisfaction. And I had emptiness, loneliness, sadness, stress, insufficiency.
Yeah,
some of those you see as primary, or some other wounds that might draw us in this way.
I can't think of any others off the top of my head, but like you said, I think there's a lot that could drive us there. I don't want to say it's a good list. It's not good, but I think it's pretty comprehensive. And again, I was just in the moment reflecting back, and I was telling you before, I was like, do you feel like any are popping out in this moment? And to me, at least for myself, I think two, maybe instigated gluttony to be more of a struggle for some people, and myself, frankly, has been loneliness and stress.
Oh, yeah.
Loneliness just from a matter of the reduced bubbles. For me, my direct family outside of, you know, my wife and kids, and the other side of the family are all out of province. And so it's been over a year since I've seen some of them face to face.
Yeah.
Our family's been kind of distant, and I've usually been okay with that, but we kind of knew that like we could get together whenever someone came and visited, but the reality of like we can't. Has really kind of gotten to me. And it's gotten worse as the years gone by. Like I was like, oh, we'll go, and now I'm kind of like, okay, I'm pretty done with this.
Yeah.
And the sense of even loneliness of like trying to gather as a parish community, right? Only seeing a segment of us and not everybody as a whole. And for my own life, it's just stress, right? How to keep my family safe, like in job, like how are we pivoting? What are the new rules and the regulations? And sometimes that maybe there's like a middle step for me for both of these and I don't know if it works for other people, but when those are really kind of surfacing and really overpowering me, it often leads to step 2 for me, which is exhaustion. It just kind of wipes me. And usually when I'm exhausted, my willpower and my desire to just, go for the greater good, right? What really will fill the ache is I'm just too mentally, spiritually, physically exhausted. That I go to the garbage can, right? I go to what's quick. I go to what's available. Something that just will, stem the ache a little bit, because I don't feel I have enough to really deal with the rest of it.
And sometimes that it's a sign that just like life is too full, right? And that's a real risk we have too.
Was there any of those that you've kind of experienced or jump out to you?
I guess of those two that the loneliness and stress, just for me personally, like the struggle I've had in COVID, I think it has been more in the realm of stress than loneliness, I would say. And partly like even in COVID, my life has still been quite full of people. Like I do 5 masses on a weekend, and I've got lots of people, and even though those interactions they're shorter, but in some ways more profound. Just because people are so grateful to be together, I guess. And my family, and also because I'm a single person living alone, even at the most restrictive we've been with the households, I've been able to connect with family, and I have most of my immediate family is close by here in this city. I do have a brother and his family in Boston, which I'm missing a lot, and they've got 2 boys that are growing up over a year now. I haven't seen. It's got a 3rd dog, so there's all sorts of stuff happening there. It's gonna happen through Facebook. So not as much loneliness for me, but definitely the stress of like how to run a parish well through a pandemic and serve people well, and even as we do things, to be as open as we can safely. But there's always that worry about like, what if there is a case? Like, what's that gonna mean? How are we gonna handle that? What if I get it? Like that's all been kind of a lot I've been carrying through this, and I shouldn't be carrying it myself, but when I'm not at my best, I do. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's fair to say. And I think that's real. And I think we're all susceptible to that in the times of when things start to be overwhelming, even though we know we should share our burdens. The tendency is we don't.
To close in.
We close in, which just makes it worse, right?
I did notice, I think it was last Easter, I kind of confessed to start of my homily that on like the second night of the shutdown, I had a really good beer and I watched Frozen on Disney Plus, and it was great. It was just what I needed. It was really uplifting. But there was a lot of stress in that moment for sure. And I think in terms of as I look at this list, we have loneliness, sadness, stress. To me, those are in some ways more like episodic. Like things will come at us that will give us those things. Whereas if we look at insufficiency and emptiness, those are almost more like long-term existential sort of questions. They come from, I guess if I were to put them together, it's kind of a lack of meaning, a lack of purpose. And I think it's fair to say for us during COVID, that has not been an issue. Like if anything, we've felt maybe more purpose in our ministry through this time because we see the need for it that much, or we're fighting for it that much more. But I imagine if we stick with the COVID example, for those who have lost their jobs through this, like often you can, or like their volunteer positions, like there could be some of that coming on, feeling like what is my purpose now? What is the meaning? What am I doing? And even outside of COVID, those can be really long-term difficult struggles for people who aren't able to find meaning, purpose in life.
I don't know. Did I talk about last week that idea of soundtracks from that book, John Acuff? I think I did. But that one is, I sometimes struggle of like, am I am I good enough? Am I loved? You know, am I worthy? That's that inefficiency. And so, yeah, it's maybe there's just times of life where that soundtrack suddenly just gets really loud,
right?
You know, and but it's always there. That's always a bit of a battle of going, right? And you know, I see a lot of that. You know, it's part of the reason. Again, I love ministry. I see the need of church and for community is that helps push against some of that stuff, right? That like I think that's a sin. That's the work of the evil one of like, yeah, that we doubt that we are children of God.
Yeah, I really like that lie that we don't matter.
Yeah,
or that we have no reason to be.
And I think circumstances can just make that worse, right? And it's like that's what I love when like our family can gather, and you know why I think it's important. There was some study years ago, I can't remember off the top of my head, what was talking about like young people need like 6 to 8 like adult faith role models in their life, which I think is just so interesting for development. And I think, I mean, we need that into adulthood as well. I need good mentors. I need people to speak into my life, because it's easy to say, well, like, I know my mom loves me, but like, you don't maybe let it get all the way down to that age, right? Yeah. But if uncle says it, or auntie says it, and grandma says it, and Father Matt welcomes me, is excited to see me, maybe I can push back that lie and start to believe that I am sufficient, right? That I am loved, I am worthy. But yeah, when you start to, those voices disappear, well, suddenly.
And that's true, because part of what we're pushing back by giving all these opportunities for love in a kid's life, we are in a way responding to all the times when they did not receive love when they should have, right? And all the unkind words and all the rejections that people face. So that's maybe why you need so many people offering that love.
Yeah, that's a good point. And the reality, like, we live in a broken world, right? And we live in a place where not all families are whole and aren't always experiences of love and mercy. And it's a real need, you know. And I think it's I know I use the word epidemic, obviously, in the terms of thing, but it's a real struggle, I think, in our world for some of these wounds that are kind of below the surface, you know, because they're silent and they're very problematic, right? And they can lead to some very hurtful places, right?
And it's easy to dull that with like gaming addiction or pot or like and various things.
Yeah. And some of those things that we do, and you said, you know, a beer and frozen once in a while, not bad for you, but essentially we put walls up in our own hearts, but also to others, that it becomes harder to see that somebody is aching, that maybe we're called in that sense of like sin and freedom. Maybe I'm in a place to kind of break through the walls or speak something into your life, but I don't know through words or actions what you need because I can't see past the wall.
Right. Yeah. And that's like both my own wall and yours.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it goes both ways.
So maybe that gets us to and part of the reason I chose this topic on this past Sunday was because of the gospel. It's one of my favorite Gospels. It's one I often give as penances for people. It's a good one, where Jesus says, "I am the vine, you are the branches, abide in me." Because to me, like, that is the answer. That is the fulfillment that we're longing for. And then that gets us to the 2 points that I thought it gives us of how do we find then freedom from gluttony, is to feel the ache, and that in that ache to turn to the Lord. So I feel like we've kind of been talking about this a lot already. Maybe a bit more about that feeling the ache. And I guess the way that I would do that is, when I do have these moments, like in terms of, say, the stress of COVID, like when I let myself realize, like, I am trying to carry this all myself, that is a bad thing to be doing. Then I can begin to let some of it go. But if I'm just carrying it and not really looking at why I'm feeling the way that I'm feeling, then it's beer and Frozen or something else. I've only watched Frozen one time. Like, to be clear.
Every 6 weeks. He's going back to the same example.
Exactly. It's
not every 6 weeks.
But to feel the ache and really acknowledge it is the first step.
Yeah, that's exactly the word that was on my brain, is acknowledge it. And sometimes for me to acknowledge it is like, I need to stop. And even maybe it was right before we recorded, just talking about a little bit of just kind of like a spiritual malaise, and just like, I'm excited. Easter was great and going, and then we like shut down it a little bit more, and just, that's kind of spiritual exhaustion and things. And there was I was getting aggravated. I was getting a little frustrated, and, I'm doing chores around the house and everything's a little hard and rough, and cabinets getting slammed a little rough, and you know, and I was trying not to lose it on my kids, but I was not doing a very good job at it. And Sharon was obvious, like, okay, you need to like just not be here for a little bit, you know. And like, so I was like, I needed to do an errand, and things were always like, every errand was 2 trips, not 1 trip, like, you know, what those things are pounding on. And she's like, just like, don't come back right away.
Okay.
Like, because sometimes like you just keep going. And she's like, just acknowledge like you were not in great space. Like, just surrender, stop, whatever you got to do. And I think I ended up like, I got like a nice coffee, and I just like sat in my car and like basically kind of like wept, and was like, I was like, Lord, like,
feel the ache.
Feel the ache, and like couldn't do anything, but I abided in a Home Hardware parking lot with a nice coffee on I think it was Saturday or Sunday. Place. And it was like, we're so busy, I got something to do or things to go, and it's like, no, just stop. And it wasn't like the to-do list didn't get smaller, the little problems I was stressed about didn't like disappear, but it was just to acknowledge it, and then like a little bit of consolation came from the Lord of kind of like,
the Lord is there in that Home Depot parking lot with the iced coffee.
Home Hardware.
Home Hardware.
Okay. But no, exactly. Yeah. Right. It was, sometimes acknowledging it is just stopping, at least in my life.
Oh yeah.
Just stop it, Colin. You know, just calm down, put the pencil down, turn the computer off. Yeah.
And I think I'd stop in silence, right? Because I can stop and watch Netflix, but then I'm still not really facing it. But to stop in the silence.
Yeah. Like what, you know, do I abide with Jesus in Netflix? Hey, that's a hard case to make, you know. But even abiding in silence, abiding in His Word, like just the simple little spiritual disciplines we have, right? And getting back to that.
Yeah, and that's, I guess that already brings us to point 2, to feel that ache, and then in that ache to turn to the Lord. And I think often we do that maybe more easy than we think when we really feel the ache. So the Lord is really, really present there when because anyway, we're just really being true to ourselves and seeing ourselves, and the Lord is there when we can really do that.
Yeah, I mean, both steps are important, but I'm kind of with you. I feel step 1 is harder than step 2, because almost like once I know the ache, once I'm there, like you're almost so exposed. I'm so going back to like that energy or whatever. Like, I know I can't do it all on my own. So like, what's left? You know. So I just look up, like, to whom shall I go? Right? You have the words of everlasting life. Like, it's just like, okay, you know, fill me up.
Yeah. And then maybe this does bring us to the last point, to freedom from gluttony, because the real beauty of this is that when we're really knowing ourselves in the Lord and feeling that ache and turning to Him in it, then I can appropriately enjoy the beer and Frozen or the Star Wars, like the pleasures of life. Like, there is a place for that in life. God made us for this and to enjoy these things. But we can enjoy them in the right way, so that they don't become controlling in us or helping us to hide from things, but to enjoy the good things of life truly and fully. That's what it lets us do.
We enjoy the good because we know who gave it to us, right? And the orientation of gratitude, right? And we receive the gift because we're aware of the giver.
Yeah, and there's the book I've been turning to here, Glittering Vices. She has the line there, the author, of gratitude and not gratification. That's what freedom from gluttony gives us, is gratitude rather than gratification.
Yeah, I was telling you right beforehand, you know, I had a bit of it wasn't like tacos and daiquiris or whatever you said kind of at the beginning of this.
Burritos and wine.
Burritos and wine. Okay, well, that's close enough. But I had a bit of a visit with a friend kind of in ministry yesterday, and it was, I think we were just like, hey, we haven't touched base in a little while, and just kind of a decent little sharing, and I said, this is not related to this. I was like, this is a needed thing, right? It was good it was heart sharing to heart, you know, and just to hear each other, to give space and to encourage, and it was good. It was good to step away from sometimes you got to get off the hamster wheel, as it were, right? And then to kind of leave, and I had a busy day after, but I think I went into what the Lord had given me for the rest of the day better, right? Because my orientation was completely different after that. So Good stuff.
So that's it. Freedom from gluttony. I'm not going to mention the sin we're going to have next weekend because I know there's some some families now told me they're placing bets on what sin I'm going to mention. So no spoilers. You just got to tune in or come to church and find out.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Be glad to hear. So I have an interesting project. Maybe I'll just mention this as maybe a challenge or if you want to partake of it. So I used to do some retreats like for staff for schools and things, and we talked about this idea of embracing the ache and this quote from St. Augustine. And so I came up with this idea. We did this little activity of like, what is the things in life that help you to embrace the ache? And so we had like little Post-it notes, and it'd be like, go for a walk or whatever, a variety of different things. And then we kind of like synthesized that list, and I probably have it somewhere. So I might try to upload it and post it of like things that you can do that help you kind of connect with the ache. And then we create a bit of like a playlist. Like for us, it's sometimes there's music and films often sometimes help me connect with the ache. So if you have ideas of how to embrace the ache that works in your life, feel free to kind of send it to us or comment if you're watching on Facebook or that good stuff. Because I think it's good for some people to share ideas of ways that help for that. So
yeah, that's great.
If you want to take that as a challenge, share how you embrace the ache.
Amen.
And until next week, we will talk about some mysterious sin
Whatever
on
it
the
may be.
weekend. But we'll see you next weekend. God bless you. Take care.